I'm Greg Johnson. Welcome back to Countercurrents Radio. I'm just going to start over again. And we are going to do now an hour with Endeavor. He is a video commentator. He does a lot of very good work. And I'd like to welcome him to the show. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me on, Greg. It's always a pleasure.
I wanted to just hop right into a question that was put up by one of our more generous and faithful donors here, Gadius Maximus, who's listening now. Gadius writes in with $20, which is very generous. He says, Endeavor, you've recently had a back and forth with a particularly dishonest and bad faith actor over your excellent video series, Lies of the Enlightenment. That being said, do you think you'll ever give the devil his due and make a video about the truths of the Enlightenment?
I think I actually have done that in several of my videos. The person in question I'm not going to address. He's a troll and a doxer, and he makes very low quality content that's not worth my time. I've made one response to him, and it's basically just the typical anti-racism crap. So other than that, I'm not engaging with him. But I think I actually have done that in a few videos. Like, I do make sure to praise certain authors where they were right. So, I'm a big fan of Thomas Hobbes, for example. I know he could be considered the father of liberalism in some ways. I believe we spoke about this last time we spoke, but I try to be fair. I try not to throw out everything, because I do think that these were intelligent guys. I might disagree with them, but I definitely think there's a lot of good points that some of them have made, and I think I've tried to do that in a few of my videos.
Well, good. I have a question here too that's relevant to this. It's from Space Monkey, who donates $3, and his question is, in what time period would you be a left-winger?
I don't think I'd ever be a left-winger.
Really?
I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say. No, I don't think I ever would be. I think that, the left kind of is like it is civilizational decay. What the left represents is the falling apart of hierarchy, the falling apart of order and tradition. Now, I mean, let's be honest. I'm not going to say that means I want to support every single thing from the past. It doesn't mean I want to bring back, I don't know, human sacrifice from prehistoric times or slavery or something like that. But no, I definitely think that you need, regardless of what social order you exist in, you need to take a stand for that. You need to defend that. So I think it's just the philosophy of the left. That's something I could just never be a part of. What I will say though is that I'd probably be satisfied with any social order prior to 1945. So if I was alive in the 1930s, I don't know if I would have been far to the right. Or maybe let's say the 1890s or something. I wouldn't have been dissatisfied with that. But I think that it's definitely important to stand up for certain right-wing principles, though.
Mm-hmm. I personally would probably be I would be on the left and say, well, around the time of the American Revolution, I think the American Revolution was definitely the left of its time. I generally like the idea of republics as opposed to monarchies. I do think that I probably would have gotten involved. I probably would have supported the French Revolution if I were French at the time of the French Revolution, and then would have been rather horrified as things happened. Looking at, say, the revolutions of 1848, a lot of the things that they were fighting for were reasonable. A lot of things they were fighting against were really bad. So you look at they demanded in Hungary in 1848. It's like an end to press censorship and things like that.
Yeah, I mean,
be opposed to things like that, to be perfectly
honest. I mean, nationalism back then was a left-wing movement. So, Hungarian nationalists and who else was there? Yeah, German nationalists. They would have been considered left-wing. I do think, though, that one of the problems is that a lot of the negative things that I addressed in the series came in along with that. So, I try to. I do think we have to kind of separate what we call nationalism today versus what the Hungarians or Germans or Italians were saying in 1848, because it's a completely different world and completely different technology, circumstances. I don't think we are trying to recreate any kind of past, but rather create a new future that's more prosperous for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good answer. So we were going to talk today about the crisis of liberalism. And I wonder, can you explain how you are conceiving that in the current moment?
Well, yes, and this is actually going to be the topic of my next video, I think. So I've spent the last year and a half doing videos on the Enlightenment, on liberalism, and taking apart some of the ideas. And I've been, floating these ideas around in my mind for the last, 2-3 years. And I'm not one to feel vindicated when you're proven right about something that you predicted bad was going to happen. But I do feel this year has proven a lot of the critiques of liberalism that people, have making a lot longer than me, have been saying for a long time. And what I wanted to look at in 2020, in the United States in particular, but I think you can apply this to pretty much any Western country, is that they've basically violated every single one of the core principles that it bases its entire legitimacy off of. That what liberalism holds up as its core values, those have been trampled on this year. Let's look at civil liberties. I mean, we've seen the most relentless crackdown on civil liberties, I think, in human history. Like, has it ever been illegal to go for a walk in the park with your grandma before? With this COVID crisis, then we've seen rule of law is another core principle of liberalism. Well, we've seen Black Lives Matter riots across the United States go largely unpunished. We've seen police officers stand down. We've seen elected officials joining in the riots. We've seen this several city blocks in Seattle allowed to secede from the United States, and this is all going on with the consent of elected officials. I mean, where is the rule of law here? Then the other one is freedom of speech. Has the president of the United States ever been censored before? Now, I know what they'll say is that they'll say, well, it's not the state doing it, but the spirit of freedom of speech is supposed to be free discourse, and that's dying off quickly too. And now free and fair elections. Now we have the most shady election ever in the United States. We had I think it was both candidates said that they might not concede if they lost the election. Before the election happened, you see they were boarding up windows in places like Chicago, Washington, D.C. It's funny that they talk about these horrible white nationalists committing violence, but they know to board up the neighborhood, the diverse neighborhoods, so to say, and the progressive ones. So we don't have free, fair, and fair elections anymore. We don't have freedom of speech. We don't have rule of law, and we don't have civil liberties. So all of liberalism's core values are a complete joke now. And I think that that's going to make both liberalism, liberal democracy, and the United States in particular, because it's been the champion of that for the last 75 years, lose a lot of credibility on the world stage. And I think that it is prime time to first force them on their own issues, because if they're holding up these values if they're upholding these values, we have to hold them to that, even if we don't believe in them. But also to push new ideas and hopefully bring about something new.
Yeah, I think the COVID crisis, really COVID and Black Lives Matter, illustrate extreme weaknesses in multi-party democracy, liberal democracy especially. And there have been a couple people, or maybe it's one person multiple times, who wants me to clarify my views on COVID. So I'd like to talk about that a bit, and we can talk about this in connection with liberal democracy too. I am very disappointed with people on the right who have gone full conspiracy on COVID. I think it's a real illness. There were, let's rewind back to February, I think it was. People on the left were poo-pooing COVID. And it was people like Tucker Carlson who were talking about it and saying, we've got to take this very, very seriously. I think that's something that's all been forgotten. People on the left were saying, go hug a Chinaman. Don't be afraid to celebrate Chinese New Year. That's racism. It's just the flu, bro. The flu, bro stuff is coming from people on the left, right? Which is very, very interesting. Then it hit. It hit in the United States. And the people in power in the United States, the oligarchy, their political servants, basically, the scribes and the press, academics, the managerial elite, the scribal managerial elite, and the oligarchy that pays their bills, they went into a panic because they realized that COVID is not like the opioid epidemic. It's not like the deaths of despair in flyover country. It is not something that's killing those white people who don't matter. It's something that kills them. It's the kind of thing that people who press the flesh and go to lots of concerts and banquets and fly all over the globe get. It's a disease that strikes the cosmopolitan elites. And also, it strikes older people, and we have a gerontocracy. We are ruled by older people, older than average people, and they're more vulnerable than average. And so suddenly what we had was elite hysteria, not mass hysteria, but elite hysteria. And I think that a lot of the COVID response was basically dictated by the vanity and folly of our elites. First of all, they're loving to signal that, oh, they're above racism and xenophobia, right? Until they actually realized, no, this is going to kill us. And then they turned on a dime and went the opposite direction. And they're the ones who are fanatical about lockdowns, fanatical about masks and things like that, because it actually affects them. So I think that's what happened here. We turned on a dime from the left, signaling openness to being completely panicked about it. And we have to understand the mentality of the extremely rich. The extremely rich don't, they treat healthcare as a luxury that they display. I know this wealthy guy who is basically a wealthy hypochondriac, and he loves to talk about how much money he spends on doctors. And it's grotesque, it's absurd. But for him, it's a display good. It's a luxury good to do this. And it's also a giant fuck you to people for the wealthy to say, well, I can just shut my life down. I can shut my company down. I can go to my estate on Long Island, or fly to Maui, or fly wherever to my country estates and hang out like that. And they want to be protected from the breath, the contagion of the peasantry, for fear of being infected by them. This is a giant flex on the part of the oligarchy and its managerial scribal hangers-on, cleaners up. Right. This is what's going on. And so it's rich. It's rich with populist potential to exploit. Rich people can afford to just shut their businesses for a while and walk away. They've got more money than God, some of them. Small businesses can't afford that. And now the rich, because they own all the huge online businesses, Jeff Bezos is twice as wealthy because of COVID. This is a huge transfer of money from the middle class to the upper class at the same time as it's a way of their flexing their superiority and power. So this is huge for us. And I do think that it's an important thing for populists to get on board with this. However, the people who claim that it's not real they're just idiots. They're fucking idiots. Of course it's real. People are dying, Go ahead.
What I'd say to that is, I actually in March was one of the people saying that we should take it seriously, and I maybe got a bit of pushback, April, May, A few things that changed my mind on it. I mean, I would like to also add that, yes, it is real. And there is a problem on the right that, and I guess just in wide society in general, is that social trust is so low. It's at such a low point that no matter what is done, no matter what happens, there will be someone who will say it's a conspiracy theory. And I think this is a product of both social media and just the fact that we are living in a society of lies. So you don't know what is true and what isn't. It's so hard to find correct information now, especially with the major institutions, the so-called the self-elected unofficial what's it called, Ministry of Truth now on these social media platforms. They themselves are partaking in all the lies that we discuss all the time. So it's always hard to know what you should trust and what you shouldn't. But I do think that we do kind of lose some credibility when we just say that it's not real, that COVID doesn't exist at all, because people have died from it. People have gotten sick from it. I've known people who got sick from it. However, I will say that, I think now that we know, now that we're several months into that, almost a year, I think that if it was truly this deadly disease that was going to wreak havoc against the population, I mean, the fear would just be palpable among the population, but that's really just not the case. The people I've known who have had COVID were sick for a couple of days and then they recovered. The other thing that also, there's a few other things that actually kind of made me change my mind on it. Was one of them is I don't want to give away my exact situation and my exact travel history, but I have seen the COVID response firsthand outside of the West, and it's nowhere nearly as hysterical, and especially, and this was also like another place that was considered a COVID hotspot. People are way less nervous about it. They do have rules. They do have like certain mask things, but it's not being treated like it's the end of the world. And you certainly aren't going to have like people screaming at you to put on your mask, or these preachy people on social media about it. So
right,
that does seem to, that hysteria over COVID does seem to be a very Western thing, at least from my perception of it. And the other thing is that just seeing how it's been incorporated into the ideology now. So you'll see these masks that say like, I don't know, Breonna Taylor on it or something like that. Like this uncanny video of Barack Obama putting on a mask that says vote. Or, you go on your Facebook and you see all these awful advertisements for clothing stores that always have the combination of the male-female combination we're all aware of now, and all the people look transgendered or something, but now they're wearing masks. So, when you kind of start to see the COVID symbology being incorporated into the organs of power and the people pushing this agenda, that's when I really started to think, we're kind of being played here.
Yeah, well, the disease is real, and I wrote 2 articles. I wrote an article about how COVID is going to change the world, and I also wrote an article called "I'm Changing My Tune About the Coronavirus." I was even calling it coronavirus then. It was so long ago I wrote this stuff. So how coronavirus will change the world, and I'm changing my tune about coronavirus. Now, from the very start, there were people on the right, before we knew anything really about this, who were poo-pooing it. These were people like Ramsey Paul, especially. He was, I was following him on Twitter at the time, and so I would see all this stuff from him. And there was a script that was being pushed from people on the kind of libertarian right that it's just the flu, bro, and we don't want to panic the markets, and we don't want to have negative consequences to the economy. Okay, that script was trotted out early on. The claim that it was like the flu was chosen, the analogy to the flu was chosen as a way of minimizing it. I thought this was totally dishonest and harmful. These were lies that were being told about this by people who are motivated essentially by economic reasons. Just like people on the left were lying about it based on concern over, racism and xenophobia. So there were two groups of liars here: the far left liars, the Hug a Chinaman liars, and I don't want to panic the markets and ruin my 401k liars, the libertarian liars. And I took up against those people early on, and I made some enemies that way. And I unfollowed a lot of people, and I blocked a lot of people on social media because I just didn't want to hear it, because it made us look stupid. But I also wrote a piece saying there will be a point when we have to change our tune about this, because eventually this disease will become known to us. We will know how to treat it. We will have a sense finally how fatal it is, and it will be part of the new normal. There will be a point in time in the future when this is just one of the ways that people die. And the tendency of people on the right is to always err on the side of complacency, and in this case on the side of liberty. And they're going to want to open up sooner. And the tendency of people on the left is to err on the side of moralistic frenzy. And they'll want to continue this on. And of course, one of the things that's going on with the fact that this is an elite leftist hysteria is that the leftists are addicted to moral signaling. And so masks are great. My little parody of this was basically, this is how your average leftist thinks. Your average sort of female cat lady, leftist cat lady, the awful types. They're thinking, when I wear my little ribbon for this politically correct cause or that politically correct cause, not everybody can see that. And, I have my vehicle festooned with all kinds of woke bumper stickers, but not everybody's behind me in traffic, right? How in the world can I show that I'm a good person in a way that everybody can see it all the time? And what better symbol of wokeness, what more prominent symbol of wokeness than having this stupid face mask on all the time? This is why I loved it when Trump mocked Biden's use of the mask. You're standing in the middle of an empty field and you've got the biggest mask in the world on. That he was pointing out that was a virtue signal. And a lot of this is virtue signaling. And they're addicted to it. So this is going to continue on for a lot longer than it has to because of leftists and hysteria. But one factor, and this relates to liberal democracy and its weakness. If COVID had not happened to the United States during an election year, we might have had a very different reaction to it, because both sides immediately wanted to politicize this. And of course, since the Democrats were trying to get the presidency, they politicized it the most. And of course, they turned on a dime, right? And we went completely hysterical and batshit, shut down, lockdown stuff. And a lot of this became, unmoored from any objective facts whatsoever, because it was a political hot potato. It was a way of signaling your superior virtue to your respective political constituencies. There were people on the right who were wanting to not do anything about it at all. And Trump was pandering to those people, and he should have said, no, this is serious. We have to do something. And there are people on the left that Biden was pandering to. What was missing? Any reason-based, fact-based analysis of what the real problem was. But that goes out the window in competitive liberal democracies.
Yeah,
especially
I think
during
that,
elective years. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that one of the indicators of late-stage liberalism is that everything is political now. And I think this is also something that is only a couple years old, maybe the last decade or so, because, I was pretty young when 9/11 happened, and I'm not an American, but I know that when 9/11 happened, it was kind of, we're all, there's no Republicans or Democrats, there's only Americans, and, it was come together as a country. And I know that was abused to justify wars in the Middle East and such. But that was actually something that could unite America in a way that is impossible to do today. So no matter what happens, someone is always going to blame the other side. And it's almost like, scoring political points against the other side is more important than solving actual problems. So, the left is out there saying like everything with COVID is the fault of Drumpf because absolutely everything wrong in the world is because of Drumpf, according to them. And that like their hatred of Trump and that their need to score the political points supersedes solving an actual problem for your country. And then not only that, it seeps into absolutely everything. Like you can't even eat a box of cereal anymore without the cereal having some like LGBT message on it or some. You can't go to McDonald's anymore without it lecturing you about black trans women or something like that. I mean, I made a joke on Twitter a couple weeks ago. I said, imagine going back 20 years in time and saying to somebody, this new internet thing, Oreo cookies are going to be using this technology 20 years from now to try to teach you to be transgendered. I mean, it just really beggars belief, but it gets into everything now. And I think that is just one of the big problems with liberal democracy is that I don't think the average person in China, well, I mean, I know they have their social credit system, but in a lot of these other countries, I don't think their entire being is fixated on politics.
Yeah. Another factor that cracks me up about masks is we don't have honest data about how useful they are. I mean, common sense would indicate that, if you are coughing on the streetcar, you're sharing your germs with people. It's flying into the air. And if you do wear a mask when you cough, that it's capturing it. Okay, that's commonsensical. But, the countries where mask wearing is very common in the Far East, those people don't even believe in the germ theory of disease. And how much of this is just superstition on the part of Asians, with mask wearing? How much of it is social signaling and how much of it is actually effective? We don't have any objective data about that because it's all politicized. In the United States, people are saying, oh, no, masks don't help. Why were they telling that lie? Well, they claimed later that they were lying. Well, so people would leave masks for professionals and not buy them up. But the point is that the politicization of everything in this late stage liberal democracy has basically destroyed people's trust in experts, public experts. And it's very, very hard to restore that trust when you need it. And this is a great case of crying wolf, or I don't know if crying wolf. Well, yeah, the boy who cried wolf. What did the boy who cried wolf do? He destroyed his credibility, and then one day he needed it. Well, that's what our establishment has done. Our establishment has destroyed its credibility by saying diversity is a strength and race is a social construct. Within the very span of this COVID crisis, they have destroyed it by saying that masks are useful and useless. And within the span of the COVID crisis, they've been saying that, if you go to an anti-mask protest or an anti-lockdown protest or a Trump rally, you're obviously spreading the disease. But you have a complete epidemiological excuse pass, right? It's perfectly fine to go to a Black Lives Matter riot.
I mean, you had, I remember the same media outlets, they'd be saying that these like COVID protests with like 100 people were irresponsible and they were killing grandma and all that stuff. But then only like a couple weeks later, you'd had these BLM protests and riots with some cases 10,000 people. And then it's just that they actually can they can actually make it click in their mind. Some of these the affluent shit libs, a lot of them, their inner monologue is just whatever the mainstream media says. So they can actually somehow rationalize in their mind that the BLM protests, those were okay, but then the the guys standing outside of the parliament, the local parliament building, or the local city council or something with a couple signs, well, then they're gonna cause everyone to fall over dead. I mean, ideally, I actually am someone that believes in authority. I actually think that you do need to have a authority that is able to make those tough decisions, in a time that there actually was a real pandemic. I'm not saying this one's a fake disease, but I think that most of us agree at this point that the response has been overkill. You would want there to be an authority that actually steps in and says, look, we got to do what we got to do here. But we just don't have that trust in that anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know how to get it back. I don't know how to get it back.
Well, part of that is endemic to liberalism, because liberalism is an attempt to avoid leadership. It's an attempt to avoid the sovereign, the person who is empowered to make decisions, the executive who basically can step in, especially in a time of emergency when decisions need to be made, and to deal with these problems. So let's talk, for instance, about what happened with Black Lives Matter. Now, if I had been Donald Trump, there would have been one night of rioting in Minneapolis, and then the next night when they came out to riot, they would have been met with hails of bullets. And I don't mean rubber bullets, I mean lead. They would have been cut down with lead. The others would have been arrested. They would have been crushed. That's what you do to riots. The first night was okay. They get one night to riot, and it's on the rioters. Every subsequent night of rioting, and it went on for months, was on Donald Trump for not simply stepping in and crushing them. Okay, but why didn't Trump do that? Well, because Trump isn't the leader in that sense. He is not the sovereign in that sense. He is an executive in a liberal democracy. So what did Donald Trump do? What was his decision-making process? Well, he was running for re-election, and he had been impeached just this same year. So he had to think about getting the black vote. And he also had to think, well, I can't actually be effective in crushing these riots because there are people in my own government who are so selfish and crazy that they will use this against me for their own personal political gain. And so basically, because he does not have the immunity of a real sovereign, and because he has to run for office and get reelected by pandering to the same people, some of the same people who are rioting or encouraging the rioters, he couldn't take effective action, even if he wanted to save the country from how many deaths? Even if 50 people were killed, that second night of rioting, that would have saved a lot of lives. There have been dozens of people killed in these riots, people maimed, and there have been enormous economic consequences. And to talk about economic consequences, you can roll your eyes and say, "Oh, you're just being a Republican now." No, I like to talk about people's livelihoods, not the economy. Many people's livelihoods have been destroyed. Many people's cities have been ruined. The ability of people to live and work in many large cities has been completely undermined, and there will be enormous consequences in the coming months to all of this. As soon as COVID lockdowns end, you're going to see enormous exoduses from major American cities, especially the ones that have large populations of joggers and Antifa. That's just that is all a consequence of having a liberal democracy which is incapable of exercising the kind of emergency power that would really be necessary to just shut this kind of stuff down after one night.
Yeah, and one of my more controversial opinions is I think that the BLM phenomenon is a good reason not to believe in a completely free press, because we have to remember that these are private media corporations, multi-billion-dollar corporations that are facilitating this entire crisis. At least with the BLM riots, with the COVID ones, they're playing into it, but not necessarily. I'm not saying that they created the disease, But I don't think you can understate just the amount of damage that the media has done to America this year in particular, but over the last 60 or 70 years. One thing that Sean Last said on Twitter, which I thought was really was really intelligent, was that the lies that the media is pushing about BLM this year should make you question the entire like civil rights narrative from 50 years ago, because people weren't standing around with iPhones recording every single thing that happened 50 years ago. You just needed to get the one picture of the white police officer swinging a baton at a black guy, and then there's your news story for the next day. And then the truth just gets lost. And there is absolutely no way to hold these media corporations accountable for what they've done. Like, let's take the George Floyd situation, for example. We now know that he died of a fentanyl overdose. We know that the I Can't Breathe narrative was a lie. We know that he was saying that before he was even on the ground. We know that the media had this information before they released this story. Maybe not about the autopsy, but definitely about the latter of those two. But they don't care. These privately owned, multi-billion-dollar news corporations have a political agenda they want to enforce, and they do not care about truth. And it's absolutely wreaked havoc on all the things that you just mentioned, the economy, on people's personal safety, on just the social climate. I mean, like, the social climate in North America is just absolutely miserable. You can't go, it's just ruining lives. It's ruining families. And it's just done so much damage to just the social fabric of people's everyday lives. I think that one of the things that just kind of grinded me down back a few years ago, and this is kind of what put me on the red pill journey, I guess you can say. I know it's kind of a cringe phrase there, but it's just how awful the social climate was with leftists, with progressives, how they're just absolutely miserable people to have in your lives. I mean, first of all, they're absolutely fearless in a conversation of any kind, in any kind of social situation. They know that the entire media, intellectual, educational apparatus has their back. So, they're absolutely fearless to be at a social gathering, be it a dinner, a Christmas dinner or something like that, or in their job or anything like that, and then just let off to just the most awful anti-white rhetoric imaginable. And I mean, that goes to say a lot about where the zeitgeist really is. But a lot of this is media driven, and there's absolutely no way to hold the media accountable to this. And I think that eventually you will need the governments of these Western countries to crack down on media. They're going to need to say, you're not allowed to advocate, you're not allowed to encourage Black Lives Matter riots. In your universities, you're not allowed to teach critical race theory. I don't care if you're a private institution. This is just cancer for the social fabric and needs to go.
It's a lie. They should not have the freedom to stand up and lie in such a way that it causes the social order to melt down. I completely agree. I do not believe in censorship because we're at getting the brunt of censorship. But there should be some way that they should be held accountable. And the people who lie, this is my rule in dealing with people. Everybody gets one lie, and then they're dead to me. This is why I don't deal with a lot of people in the movement. This is why I, quote unquote, infight. Because if somebody lies to my face or lies about me publicly, it is as if they are dead. And we simply cannot have any forgiveness. There's no way of coming back from that. We have to have a movement that plays to our strengths, which is that we tell the truth and we're on the side of the truth. And when you have people who are reckless liars, and that would include Ramsey Paul, he's a dishonest man. That's why I have nothing more to do with him. He's a liar. We simply can't tolerate these fuckers, to put it very brutally. We can't tolerate liars, and that's true with the press. There are countless cases of people lying, and journalists lie and people die. Michael Brown and all that suffering, all that Black Lives Matter stuff, the stuff connected with Trayvon Martin. Journalists told lies and people died because of this. None of these journalists have been punished. How do you punish them? Well, you shut them down. Okay? You simply say, I'm sorry, you've lost your journalist license. You don't have a license to lie. You don't have a license to destroy people's lives. You've lost your journalist license. You cannot address the public for the rest of your life. And the corporations, and the left loves to talk about institutional cultures and how institutions have to be totally overturned or destroyed because, well, somebody might be racist or sexist or something. The media is an institution, a culture of lying. And these institutions need to be simply shut down. Corporations are legal persons. Why not execute them, right? We execute criminals. Why not execute corporations for being basically criminal enterprises? We shut down the mafia. Those are criminal enterprises. Why not shut down criminal corporations? I would shut down all the major news networks. I would shut down the New York Times. I would put everybody who creates quote unquote content for these entities on a blacklist. You basically, raze everything to the ground and then you let people come back. And this time you have to have some kind of system where a person is licensed to be a journalist. And their license to be a journalist is based on integrity and honesty. And if people tell lies, they lose their license. And that's it. They don't have the right to speak in public anymore. They don't have a platform anymore. And organizations that engage in reckless lying and defamation should be basically shut down in the same way. The way I look at this is that we should treat academia and the mainstream media in America somewhat like Henry VIII treated the Catholic Church. Just establish it, shut it down, put all of its personnel on a blacklist, and to do that, we simply can't afford to have tens of billions of dollars and the power to basically destroy society in the hands of people who have proven that they abuse it.
And it just goes back to the problem with liberal democracy is that none of this can be done through liberalism. It blocks any kind of solution to the situation we're in. So, I just say for anyone who's just holding on to that, just get real. But I think, the classic liberal is a dying breed these days. I think everyone at this point realizes that there's just no pathway to success through that means. It's just like you were mentioning with Woes earlier, there's like libertarianism and classic liberalism. It's just a dead end. And, we got the right needs to get serious about using power. A lot of one thing is, I'm good friends with Academic Agent. I have a lot of respect for him, but every time I'm on his channel, there'll be these libertarians just absolutely shrieking in the comment section. Mm-hmm. And it's really quite funny, but, just the second you actually suggest that, we're going to need the government to actually do something once, then, they'll, that's when they just shut off. And that's like that's just beyond the pale for them. But, I think ultimately it is just a useless position to hold. And it's one that thankfully I think people are abandoning.
Yeah, I think so. And the trouble is, though, that people identify liberty with liberalism. And I think that that's something that's rapidly falling apart. That illusion is rapidly falling apart. These liberals don't actually believe in liberty. They're creating a police state. There's a wonderful book by a fellow, I think his name is Dominic Losurdo. He's an ultra leftist academic, but it's about liberalism, and basically it goes back to the 19th century, and it looks at all the things that liberals advocated. There were liberals who advocated slavery and genocide and just absolutely horrible things, colonialism and so forth. Liberalism as an ideology has been squared with a lot of horrible stuff. And it's being squared with a police state. It's being squared with, again, the end of the rule of law, end of freedom of speech, and so on and so forth. Liberalism is not a great guardian of liberty. And I do think liberty is a value. And the way I think that people on our side of the right, the ethno-nationalist types, should put this is that I believe that liberty is a value. I believe that individualism is a value. I just don't believe that they're the highest values in society and that they can be used to trump the common good and other things that are higher in value. But we need to, I think, detach liberalism and liberty and come up with an account of how we can, say, have freedom of speech without this liberal ideological cant that doesn't seem to rein in liberals from knocking us off YouTube and censoring us constantly.
Well, I actually made an entire video about this, about the concept of liberty and how liberalism is wrong about it. Liberty is not, the government not having the power to do something or other. Liberty is the feeling of being secure, comfortable, and fulfilled within your own land. And I don't think that requires liberalism. And I think in our present day and age, that it actually runs contrary to that. I mean, I'll give you an example. I actually, when I was in Eastern Europe, I've spent time in Russia, and it's officially an authoritarian country, and according to liberalism, it's not a free country. But the thing is, you don't need to walk through every conversation there like a minefield. You're not going to have your life ruined by telling the truth about black crime statistics or something like that. And that's a lot more freeing than living in one of these countries that, even the United States, the government might not haul you off to jail, but you're still going to never be allowed to have a job again if you tell the truth about black crime or something like that. And in the UK, they actually will show up at your door and fine you for being spicy on social media. So it's definitely that people kind of liberalism really misses the mark on what liberty actually is. John Stuart Mill was completely wrong. It doesn't mean the government not having power. It means actually the feeling of security, the feeling of comfort, belonging, and fulfillment within your own land. And that's ultimately what, us on the nationalist, pro-white, right wing, that's what we want most of all. And I think ours would actually be the most free society, because, like I mentioned, with all this social cancer that is going on in North America right now, none of that would be happening in a homogenous society. In a homogenous, socially conservative society, sure, you might not be able to, the 0.1% of people who want to get a sex change and then go into the woman's change room, you're not allowed to do that. But for the average person, the average normal person who just wants to live a normal, fulfilled, stable life, they would have far more liberty in their day-to-day life. They wouldn't need the government to be interfering with them constantly. And basically we have to redefine what liberty actually is, because I don't think that what the West upholds today as freedom, what Freedom House says, that's not what freedom actually means.
Yeah, totally. One of the things that's most hypocritical, it's just become laughable, is when liberals talk about, the rule of law is being threatened in Poland, or the rule of law is being threatened in Hungary. It's like, what are they talking about?
The rule of law by their own democratically elected politicians are violating whose rule of law?
Yeah, the Poles and the Hungarians are ruling themselves the way that Westerners don't like that. That means the rule of law. The rule of law basically means whatever's dictated by the editorial page of the New York Times in these people's mentality. And they will actually describe things as corruption. For instance, when the Hungarian government went through all of these leading institutions of society and started replacing people who were left-wing ideologues, who were abusing their position. This was treated as corruption, when in fact this is the government engaging in lawful activity according to the mandate of the electorate. But this is somehow being treated as corruption. At a certain point, you just have to recognize that words mean nothing anymore when they come out of these people's mouths, and that the only thing that's consistent about their speech and behavior is that they want power for themselves and they want to humiliate you. They want power for themselves and want to destroy you. And the classic stuff about diversity, none of that's inconsistent. It's consistently anti-white.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Like, one thing I say about the left is just, if you ever think they're hypocrites, they're not hypocrites. They're just anti-white, and they'll pick whatever is the most anti-white position on anything. But I mean, with the example with Hungary, like, let's look at the opposite. Like, so according to the New York Times, this is anti-freedom, and this is Hungary violating freedom. Well, I mean, let's as a thought experiment, what would happen if they didn't actually do this? You might have this one guy in a university with a six-figure salary and a very interesting early life section on Wikipedia, spreading these ideas about white privilege and things like that. But then the average Hungarian man, he's going to, work up to send his daughter to university, and, he's thinking about the future. Well, then she comes home and tells him that he's, human scum for being a cisgendered white male, and how Hungary is racist against black people and how they need to open their borders or something like that. And she's probably going to shave her head and never have kids and be a basket case her entire life. I mean, and that's going to happen to an entire generation of kids, as is what's happening in the West. Whose freedom is more important? This one corrupt leftist ideologue who just wants to destroy your society, or the average person who you need as, these families, the average person you need as this building block to build a society into the future? And I think that you have to make these decisions. And unfortunately, the right holding on to these liberal principles is what's going to prevent us from ever actually fixing it, because the left is absolutely determined to destroy you. And if you're not going to actually approach them on that battlefield, you're not going to win.
Yeah, totally. The whole instinctive mentality of the right, especially the classical liberal right in America, is to not exercise power for the benefit of its constituency and for the benefit of society as a whole. And that's just suicide, because the other guys don't play by those rules. And that just means you're adopting a losing strategy. It's very, very foolish, and yet that's the classical liberal programming that hobbles a lot of right-wingers in the West. My first reaction to COVID as a right-winger was, this is fantastic. If I were Trump, if I were President Trump, I would have immediately done what Orban did, which is to say, it's too perilous for the Congress to meet. They might get infected. I'm just going to govern by decree until this is over, because we don't want Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to get sick. The last thing we want is these people to get sick. So we're just going to, govern by decree for a while and just let you guys socially distance. And then I would have, shut the borders, and then I would have used various powers that the president actually has, like defense-related powers, to order that we bring home manufacturing of products that are essential to healthcare, vaccines, antibiotics, medicines of all kinds, medical equipment. It was a stupid situation that Americans allow most of our valuable medical stuff to be outsourced to other countries. What if these countries have, say, a pandemic, and they won't export things that we need? It was obvious to anybody who thinks ahead a little bit that could happen. I would have used this as a basis for a massive power grab, and I would have used it to advance the populist nationalist agenda. Now, why didn't Trump do that? Well, Trump was partially hobbled by republicanism, by having Republicans around him who just think that that state power is the worst possible thing in the world to have. If the government has that power, your enemies might use it against you. It's like, well, first of all, they do have that power, and they always use it against us. So stop being dumb. And second, it would have actually been a good thing. It would have advanced populist and nationalist interests. It would be great if we just use this as an excuse to shut borders. Let's have borders again. Let's have the ability to test people coming in and out of your society. COVID has been great for stanching America's immigration problems. That's been wonderful. So, I mean, it could have been used for very good purposes. Now, what did the left do when they finally got serious about it? Well, they used it as a giant power grab. And what did the leftists do? Well, they emptied jails. They let criminals out of jails. Jail shouldn't be a death sentence just because he's a child molester. That kind of insanity. They did that. They seized the power that the right refused to seize. And that's always the way it works. And we need a right that is basically purged of classical liberalism. And at the core of classical liberalism is the fear of power and the fear of responsibility, the fear of having an executive who has the ability in an emergency like a pandemic to basically do that kind of executive action for the common good. Other reasons why Trump didn't do it is because, well, he knew that it would be used against him, and he was trying to get reelected. And there are just so many incentives in liberal democracy that prevent people from exercising power for the good of society. And, we really can't afford this foolishness any longer. We might be able to muddle through if we have one crisis in a year or one crisis within, say, a 4-year administration. But when you get 4 crises, bam, 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 like we did this year, I don't think the system is strong enough to recover from it.
Yeah, and I think that, I do hope that there is, because I do feel like there is a very widespread distrust of the powers that be right now. There is people who are very anti-system. The problem is that they're not always on the same page. So, you get the QAnon guys, the MAGA guys, the anti-lockdown movement now. A lot of them are opposing the same system we are, but, not entirely, not for the entirely the same reasons. I do feel like the dissident right, the pro-European right-wing nationalist movement does actually have the best understanding of what's going on right now, in my opinion. And I do think that we have a lot of opportunity now, just with the elites and the system, just with so little trust in it, that hopefully we can do a blow to their legitimacy in the coming year, especially with this Great Reset thing. I think no one wants this. Nobody wants this, and they're even saying it's a conspiracy theory while using the exact slogan "Build Back Better." I mean, it just goes to show, like, back to what we're saying about the media lying. I mean, the media, out of one side of their mouth, they can say that the Great Reset is a conspiracy theory, and out of the other side of their mouth, they'll post a video of Justin Trudeau using the word reset and building back better, and all these organizations have Build Back Better on it. I think the going forward, we have to use the newly founded distrust in the system to our advantage, really.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think distrust is one of the main factors that feeds into populism. There's this great book that I've been recommending since 2018. It's by Eatwell and Goodwin. It's called National Populism, The Revolt Against Liberal Democracy. And their argument is basically that there are 4 factors that are long-standing, very deep-seated social trends in basically every white society that are giving rise to populism. And one of those is distrust in institutions. And the amount of social distrust is astonishing. Since the 1960s in America, trust in the government has collapsed. It's very, very, very low now. And this is, again, why Trump, for, I think, all of his good ideas and good intentions, was a pretty poor president. He couldn't accomplish very much because Well, he faced a lot of opposition within his own government, for instance. One of the reasons why Trump didn't use the military to quell these riots is the military basically refused. When there was discussion, there was a mutiny, or there would have been a mutiny if he had actually given the order. So the institutions are so broken down, even within the government. There's so much insubordination. People don't take their oaths seriously anymore. And at a point, every system, every politician will arrive at a decision point. Does he basically pursue his own agenda, or does he pursue the legitimacy of the system? Yeah, and the Democrats have basically just thrown legitimacy aside with this attempt to steal the election.
Yeah, in the case of Trump, I don't think he really cares about us all that much. Maybe he cares about the idea of America as a proposition nation. But if there is one thing Donald Trump does care about, it's Donald Trump. And maybe this might be wishful thinking a bit, but I hope that this crisis right now forces Trump to act, if anything else, just to save his own skin, because I don't see. I mean, I know he used to be part of the New York billionaire elite a couple years ago, but I think they do legitimately hate him because he has legitimized a lot of our ideas. Totally. And I think that, what I hope is that at least Trump can maybe give us something in order to save himself, because I think that he's not going to be welcomed back into the elite circles. I may be wrong about that, but I don't know how they can bring him back in after they've spent the last 5 years saying that he's the reincarnation of Satan.
Right. Well, I think that they will try and destroy him as soon as he's out of office. They will try and basically find ways of putting him in jail, of pauperizing him, of tearing his organizations apart, of attacking his family. These people are insanely vindictive. And even the ones who maybe got this all going just out of calculations, Hillary Clinton couldn't face the fact that she was a lousy candidate and had the entire system on her side and still lost to this Trump guy. Hillary Clinton couldn't take responsibility, so she started pushing this Russia conspiracy stuff. I'm pretty sure that she didn't believe it for a second, not a second. But the trouble is that once you start gaslighting people, well, they really do believe this shit and they really do go insane. And this has unleashed a torrent of hysteria in this society. It's not going to go away. Civility is dead. It's not going to come back. We're never going to go back to a situation where we have quote unquote norms and civility. And it's the left that destroyed that. And the idea that Trump can just exit the White House and go back into private life safely is crazy. They've made a situation where it's not safe for him to allow these people to have power again, and it's not safe for any of us either.
And Oh, go ahead.
There are tens of millions. There are tens of millions of white Americans, primarily white Americans, who voted for him, who are thinking, I don't really care who got more votes in the end. It's not safe to have these insane, vindictive freaks in power because they're going to come after me. They're going to come after my family. It's not safe. We can't have this system. At a certain point, if the left tries to go banana republic, we should just feel, okay, we're liberated. We are absolved from having to follow the rules either. And we need to the right needs to take power and hold on to it for our own safety, if no other reason. Go ahead.
Well, I hope that, and this may be me dreaming here, but I hope that, Trump with his billions of dollars, maybe he starts sending those towards dissident organizations, because, if he's on the outs with the elites, he's going to need to find new friends. That might be wishful thinking, but we're going to need funding to come from somewhere.
Well, I do think a lot of people are going to unplug from the system and start thinking in terms of radical alternatives, and that's going to be good for us. It's going to be very bad for us to have, if Trump is out of office, obviously, it's going to be very bad for us to have more rampant tech censorship and also the government actually oppressing us as well. No question. So anyway, it's been a little more than an hour, and I don't want to completely blow the minds of our listeners with too much great quote unquote content. So let's wrap up now. How do people follow your work?
You can still find me on YouTube for the time being. My YouTube channel is called Endeavor. I'm on Twitter also for the time being. You can follow me there. I'm trying to build up my alternative platforms with BitChute and Telegram. So I definitely recommend following me there because I think the mainstream ones, our time on there is not very long. So definitely give me a follow on BitChute and Telegram. And for the time being, you can still find me on YouTube and Twitter. Endeavor is the name of the channel.
That's great. And we will put this all in the show notes. What we will do is we'll repost this stream as a standalone sort of podcast at the Countercurrents Radio tab at the Countercurrents site, probably on Wednesday. So we'll put up Woes on Tuesday and you on Wednesday, and that'll have all your information in there as links so people can follow you there. I've really enjoyed this. Sorry we got off to a somewhat rocky start, but I think it's been a lot of food for thought, and I really want to do this again soon.
Thanks for having me on, Greg.
Okay, great. And I want to thank everybody in the audience, all of our listeners. We've had more than 600 people at the peak. I want to thank our donors. You've been very generous. I want to thank all of the moderators who kept things moderated. And we will be back next week. And next week, I'm just going to do an Ask Me Anything session because, well, I've been sort of dragging my feet about doing a solo AMA for a long time, and I'm finally just going to take the plunge. So next week is going to be a solo AMA for at least 2 hours, and we will be back then. So thank you very much, and good night.